That cursed place of all wickedness, where the deep water starts, gate of hell, sheer drop down to a bottom no sounding line can touch. Old Captain Obed done it, him that found out more'n was good for him in the South Sea Islands. Everybody was in a bad way them days. Trade falling off, mills losing business, even the new ones. And the best of our men folks killed the privateering in the War of 1812, or lost with the Elizy brig and the Ranger Snow, both of 'em Gilman ventures. Obed Marsh, he had 3 ships afloat, Brigantine Columbia, Brig Hetty, and bark Sumatra Queen. He was the only one as kept on with the East Indian Pacific trade, though Esdras Martin's barkentine Malay Pride made a venture as late as 28. Never was nobody like Captain Obed. Old limb of Satan. I can mind him a-telling about furrin parts, calling all the folks stupid for going to Christian meeting and bearing their burdens meek and lowly. Says they ought to get better gods like some of the folks in the Inges. Gods that'd bring 'em good fishing in return for their sacrifices and that'd really answer folks' prayers. Matt Elliott, his first mate, talked a lot too, only he was agin folks doing any heathen things. Told about an island east of Otaheite where there was a lot of stone ruins older than anybody knew anything about, kind of like them on Ponape in the Carolines, but with carvings of faces that looked like the big statues on the Easter Island. They was a little volcanic island near there, too, where there was other ruins with different carvings, ruins all wore away like they'd been under the sea unked, and with pictures of awful monsters all over 'em. Well, sir, Matt, he says the natives around there had all the fish they could catch and sported bracelets and armlets and head rigs made out of a queer kind of gold and covered with pictures of monsters, just like the ones carved over the ruins on the little island. Sort of fish-like frogs or frog-like fishes that was drawed in all kinds of positions like they was human beings. Nobody could get out of them where they got all the stuff, and all the other natives wondered how they managed to find fish in plenty even when the very next islands had lean pickings. Matt, he got to wondering too, and so did Captain Obed. Obed, he notices besides that lots of the handsome young folks had dropped out of sight for good from year to year, and that there weren't many old folks around. Also, he thinks some of the folks looked darn queer, even for Kanakies. It took Obed to get the truth out of them heathen. I don't know how he done it, but he begun by trading for the gold-like things they wore. Asked them where they come from, and if they could get more, and finally wormed the story out of the old chief. Wallachia, they called him. Nobody but Obed had ever believed the old yeller devil, but the captain could read folks like they was books. Nobody never believes me now when I tell 'em, and I don't suppose you will, young feller. Though come to look at you, you have kinda got them sharp reading eyes like Obed had.
I found myself shuddering at the terrible and sincere portentousness of his intonation, even though I knew his tale could be nothing but drunken fantasy.
Well, sir, Obed, he learned that these things on this earth as most folks never heard about, and wouldn't believe if they did hear. It seems these Kanakies was sacrificing heaps of their young men and maidens to some kind of god things that lived under the sea, and getting all kinds of favor in return. They met the things on the little islet with the queer ruins, and it seems them awful pictures of frogfish monsters was supposed to be pictures of these things. Maybe they was the kind of critters as got all the mermaid stories and such started. They had all kinds of cities on the sea bottom, and this island was heaved up from there. Seems they was some of the things alive in the stone buildings when the islands come up sudden to the surface. That's how the Kanakees got wind they was down there. Made sign talk as soon as they got over being scared, and pieced up a bargain before long. When it come to mating with them toad-looking fishes, the Kanakees kind of balked, but finally they learnt something as put a new face on the matter. Seems that human folks has got a kind of relation to such water beasts, that everything alive come about of the water hunked, and only needs a little change to go back again. Them things told the Kanakees that if they mixed bloods, there'd be children as 'ud look human at first, but later turn more and more like the things, till finally they take to the water and join the main lot of things down there. And this is the important part, young fella. Them as turned into fish things and went into the water wouldn't never die. Them things never died, 'cept they was killed violent. Well, sir, it seems by the time Obed knowed them islanders, they was all full of fish blood from them deep water things. When they got old and begun to show it, they was kept hid until they felt like taking to the water and quitting the place. Some was more touched than others, and some never did change quiet enough to take to the water. But mostly they turned out just the way them things said. Them as was born more like the things changed early, but them as was nearly human sometimes stayed on the island till they was past 70, though they'd usually go down under for trial trips afore that. Folks as had took to the water generally come back a good deal to visit, so's a man would often be a-talking to his own 5 times great-grandfather who'd left the dry land a couple of 100 years or so before. Everybody got out of the idea of dying. They thought what they got was well worth all they had to give up, and I guess Obed kind of come to think the same himself when he chewed over old Wallachie's story a bit. Wallachia, though, was one of the few as hadn't got none of the fish blood, being of a royal line that intermarry with royal lines on other islands. Wallachia, he showed Obed a lot of rites and incantations as had to do with the sea things, and let him see some of the folks in the villages had changed a lot from human shape. Somehow or other, though, he never would let him see one of the regular things from right out of the water. In the end, he give him a funny kind of thingamajig made out of lead or something that he said'd bring up the fish things from any place in the water where there might be a nest of 'em. The idea was to drop it down with the right kind of prayers and such. Wallachia allowed as the things was scattered all over the world, so that anybody that looked about could find a nest and bring 'em up if they was wanted. Matt, now he didn't like this business at all, and wanted Obed should keep away from the island. But the captain was sharp for gain, and found he could get them gold-like things so cheap it'd pay him to make a speciality of 'em. Things went on that way for years, and Obed got enough of that gold-like stuff to make him start the refinery in Waite's old run-down fulling mill. He didn't dare sell the pieces like they was, for folks would be all the time asking questions. All the same, his crews would get a piece and dispose of it now and then, even though they was swore to keep quiet, and he let his women folks wear some of the pieces as was more human-like than most. Well, come about 38, when I was 7-year-old, Obed, he found the island people all wiped out between voyages. Seems the other normal islanders had got wind of what was going on and had took matters into their own hands. Pious cusses, these was. They didn't leave nothing standing on either the main island or the little volcanic island, 'cept what parts of the ruins was too big to knock down. In some places they was little stones strewed about, like charms. Folks all wiped out. No trace of no gold-like things, and none of the nearby Kanakees would breathe a word about the matter. Wouldn't even admit there'd ever been any people on that island. Now that naturally hit Obed pretty hard, seeing as his normal trade was doing very poor. It hit the whole of Innsmouth too, because in seafaring days what profited the master of a ship generally profited the crew proportionate. Most of the folks around the town took the hard times kind of sheep-like and resigned, but they was in bad shape because the fishing was petering out and the mills wasn't doing none too well. Now then's the time, Obed, he began a-cursing at the folks for being dull sheep and praying to a Christian heaven as didn't help him none. He told him he'd know that folks as prayed to God would give something you really need, and says if a good bunch of men would stand by him, he could maybe get a hold of certain powers as would bring plenty of fish and quite a bit of gold. Of course, them as sarved on the Sumatra Queen and seed the island knowed what he meant, and weren't none too anxious to get close to see things like they'd hear tell on. But them as didn't know what it was all about got kind of swayed by what Obed had to say, and begun to ask him what he could do to set him on the way to the faith as would bring him results. Poor Matt, he allus was agin it. He tried to line up the folks on his side and had long talks with the preachers, not no use. They run the congregational parson out of town, and the Methodist feller quit. Never did see resolved Babcock the Baptist parson again. Rotha Jehovah, I was a mighty little critter, but I heard what I heard and seen what I seen. Dagon and Ashtoreth, Belial and Beelzebub, golden calf and the idols of Canaan and the Philistines, Babylonish abominations, meany, tickle a parson. He stopped, and from the look in his watery blue eyes, I feared he was close to a stupor brought on by the whiskey I'd given him. But when I gently shook his shoulder, he turned on me with astonishing alertness and snapped out some more obscure phrases. Don't believe me, eh? Yeah, you just tell me, young feller. Why, Captain Obed and 20-odd other folks used to row out to Devil Reef in the dead of night and chant things so loud you could hear 'em all over town when the wind was right. Tell me that, huh? And tell me why Obed was always dropping heavy things down into the deep water, the other side of the reef, where the bottom shoots down like a cliff lower than you can sound. Tell me what he done with that funny-shaped leg thingamajig as Wallachia gave him. And why'd the new church parsons, fellers as used to be sailors, wear them queer robes and cover themselves with them gold-like things Obed brung, huh? The watery blue eyes were almost savage and maniacal now, and the dirty white beard bristled electrically. Old Zadok probably saw me shrink back, for he had begun to cackle evilly. You're beginning to see, huh? The old man was getting hysterical, and I began to shiver with a nameless alarm. He laid a gnarled claw on my shoulder, and it seemed to me that its shaking was not altogether that of mirth. You suppose one night you seed something heavy heaved off an Obed's dory beyond the reef, and then learned next day a young feller was missing from home, huh? Did anybody ever see Hyde or Hera Hiram Gilman again? Did they? And Nick Pierce? And Llewellyn Waite? And Adoniram Southwick? And Henry Garrison, huh? Shapes talking sign language with their hands. Them as had real hands. Well, sir, that was the time Obed begun to get on his feet again. Folks see his 3 daughters a wearing gold-like things as nobody'd ever seen on 'em before, and smoke started coming out of the refinery chimbley. Other folks were prospering, too. Fish begun to swarm into the harbor fit to kill, and heaven knows what size cargoes we'd begun to ship out to Newburyport, Arkham, and Boston. 'Twas then Obed got the old branch railroad put through. Some Kingsport fishermen heard about the catch and come up in sloops, but they was all lost. Nobody ever see 'em again. And just then, our folks organized the Esoteric Order of Dagon and bought Masonic Hall off an cavalry commandery for it. Matt Elliott was a Mason and again the selling, but he dropped out of sight just then. Now remember, I ain't saying Obed was sat on having things just like they was on that Kankakee Isle. I don't think he aimed at first to do no mixing, nor raise no young'uns to take to the water and turn into fishes with eternal life. He wanted them gold things, and was willing to pay heavy, and I guess the others was satisfied for a while. Come in 46, the town done some looking and thinking for itself. Too many folks missing, too much wild preaching at meeting of a Sunday. Too much talk about that reef. There was a party one night as followed Obed's crowd out to the reef, and I heard shots betwixt the dories. Next day, Obed and 32 others was in jail, with everybody a-wondering just what was afoot and just what charge agin him could be got to hold. God, if anybody'd look ahead. Couple weeks later, when nothing had been thrown into the sea for that long.
He paused for a while, and when he finally continued, his voice was little more than a hoarse whisper.
That awful night, I seed him. I was up in the cupola of our house. Hordes of 'em, swarms of 'em, all over the reef, swimming up the harbor into the Monooksett. God, what happened in the streets of Innsmouth that night? They rattled our door, but Pa wouldn't open. And then he clumb out of the kitchen window with his musket to find selectman Mowry and see what he could do. Mounds of the dead and the dying. Shots and screams. Shouting in Old Square and Town Square. New Church Green. Jail throwed open. Proclamation. Treason. And called it the plague when folks come in and found half our people missing. Nobody left but them as a join in with Obed and them things, or else keep quiet. Never heard of my pa no more.
The old man was panting and perspiring profusely.
Everything cleaned up in the morning, but there was traces. Obed, he kinda takes charge and says things is gonna be changed. Others will worship with us at meeting time, and certain houses has got to entertain guests. They wanted to mix like they done with the Kanakakees, and he, for one, didn't feel bound to stop 'em. Far gone was Obed, just like a crazy man on the subject. He says they brung us fish and treasure, and should have what they hankered after. Nothing was to be different on the outside. Only we was to keep shy of strangers if we knowed what was good for us. We all had to take the oath of Dagon, and later on they was second and third oaths that some on us took. Them as had helped special, it gets special rewards, gold and such. No use balking, for they was millions of 'em down there. They'd rather not start rising and wiping out humankind, but if they was gave away and forced to, they could do a lot toward just that. Now, we didn't have them old charms to cut 'em off like folks in the South Sea did, and them Kanakees wouldn't never give away their secrets. Yield up enough sacrifices and savage knickknacks and harborage in the town when they wanted it, and they let well enough alone. Wouldn't bother no strangers as might bear tales outside, that is, without they got prying. All in the band of the faithful, Order of Dagon, and the children should never die, but go back to the Mother Hydra and Father Dagon, what we all come from on't. La, Cthulhu verteken, van gloei, mgluwa nuf, Cthulhu relaya, waga nagel verteken.
Old Zadok, was fast lapsing into stark raving, and I held my breath. Poor old soul. To what pitiful depths of hallucination had his liquor, plus his hatred of the decay, alienage, and disease around him, brought that fertile, imaginative brain? He began to moan now, and tears were coursing down his channeled cheeks into the depths of his beard.
God, what I seen sank I was 15-year-old. Mean, tickle parson. The folks as was missing, and them as killed themselves. Them as told things in Arkham or Ipswich or such places was all called crazy, like you're calling me right now. But God, what I seen. They'd have killed me long ago for what I know. Only I'd took the first and second oaths of Dagon off of Obed, so I was protected unless in a jury of 'em proved I told things knowing and deliberate. But I wouldn't take the third oath. I'd have died rather than take that. It got worse around Civil War time, when children born St. 46 begun to grow up. Some of 'em, that is. I was afeard. Never did no prying arter that awful night, and never see one of them close to in all my life. That is, never no full-blooded one. I went to the war, and if I'd have had any guts or sense, I'd have never come back, but settled away from here. But folks wrote me things once so bad. That, I suppose, was because government draft men was in town after '63. After the war, it was just as bad again. People begun to fall off, mills and shops shut down. Shipping stopped and the harbor choked up. Railroad give up. But they never stopped swimming in and out of the river from that cursed reef of Satan. And more attic windows got boarded up, and more noises was heard in houses as one supposed to have nobody in 'em. And then 46, Captain Obed took a second wife that nobody in the town never seen. Some says he didn't want to, but was made to by them as he called in. He had 3 children by her. 2 was disappeared young, but one gal as looked like anybody else and was educated in Europe. Obed finally got her married off by a trick to an Arkham fella as didn't suspect nothing. But nobody outside'll have nothing to do with Innsmouth folks now. Barnabas Morris that runs the refinery now is Obed's grandson by his first wife, son of Onesiphorus, his eldest son. But his mother was another of them as one never seen outdoors. Right now, Barnabas is about changed. Can't shut his eyes no more, and is all out of shape. Maybe he's tried it already. They do sometimes go down for little spells afore they go for good. Ain't been seen about in public for nigh on 10 years. Don't know how his poor wife can feel. She come from Ipswich, and they nigh lynched Barnabas when he courted her 50-odd years ago. Obed, he died in 78. All the next generation's gone now. His first wife's children dead, and the rest, God knows.
The sound of the incoming tide was now very insistent, and little by little it seemed to change the old man's mood from maudlin tearfulness to watchful fear. He would pause now and then to renew those nervous glances over his shoulder or out toward the reef, and despite the wild absurdity of his tale, I could not help beginning to share his vague apprehensiveness. Zadok now grew shriller, and seemed to be trying to whip up his courage with louder speech.
Hey, you, why don't you say something? How'd you like to be living in a town like this, with everything a-rotting and a-dying, and boarded-up monsters crawling and bleating and barking and hopping around black cellars and attics every way you turn? Hey! How'd you like to hear the howling night after night from the churches and order a dagon hall and know what's doing part of the howling? How'd you like to hear what comes from that awful reef every May Eve and Hallowmass? Huh? You think the old man's crazy, huh? Well, sir, let me tell you, that ain't the worst. Well, even if I ain't told nobody nothing yet, I'm a-going to now. You just sit still and listen to me, boy. This is what I ain't never told nobody. I says I didn't do no prying after that night, but I found things out just the same. You want to know what the real horror is? Huh? Well, this is it. Well, it's this. It ain't what them fish devils has done, but what they're a-going to do. They're a-bringing things up out of where they come from into the town. They've been doing it for years and slackening up lately. Them houses north of the river betwixt Water and Main Streets is full of them. Them devils and what they brung. And when they get ready, I say, when they get ready. You ever hear tell of a Shoggoth? Hey, d'you hear me? I tell you, I know what them things be. I seen 'em one night when...
The hideous suddenness and inhuman frightfulness of the old man's shriek almost made me faint. His eyes, looking past me toward the malodorous sea, were positively starting from his head, while his face was a mask of fear worthy of Greek tragedy. His bony claw dug monstrously into my shoulder, and he made no motion as I turned my head to look at whatever he glimpsed. There was nothing that I could see, only the incoming tide, with perhaps one set of ripples more local than the long-flung line of breakers. But now, Zadok was shaking me, and I turned back to watch the melting of that fear-frozen face into a chaos of twitching eyelids and mumbling gums. Presently his voice came back, albeit as a trembling whisper.
Get out of here. Get out of here. They seen us. Get out for your life. Don't wait for nothing. They know now. Run for it. Quick, out of this town.
Another heavy wave dashed against the loosening masonry of the bygone wharf and changed the mad ancient's whisper to another inhuman and blood-curdling scream. Before I could recover my scattered wits, he had relaxed his clutch on my shoulder and dashed wildly inland toward the street, reeling northward around the ruined warehouse wall. I glanced back at the sea, but there was nothing there. And when I reached Water Street and looked along it toward the north, there was no remaining trace of Zadok Allen.